Militarily Speaking, episode 72, John Wayne Troxell. We're just going to go like Madonna, or just one name.
One name?
Michael.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's one of his three names that you pick. This episode, we talk with John Wayne Troxell, Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman.
Welcome to Militarily Speaking, brought to you by Armed Forces Bank. This is Tom McLean and her.
And me.
and Jodi Vickery. I am the military retail executive for Armed Forces Bank, and Jodi is the Executive Vice President, Director of Consumer Banking. Thrilled to have Jodi on our team. She's the straw that stirs.
As long as it's stirring coffee, we can use that.
All day long.
We can use that. Again, welcome to our show. We're excited to have you listening and learning all about our guest, John Wayne Troxell. I want to take a minute, John, and tell our audience a little bit about your background, and then I think you'll do a much
There's
better.
a lot to say about it.
There's a lot. Like I could do a whole podcast just about that,
right now.
but I'm going to do the skinny down version because I know John will speak to it in far more detail than I could do service to it. So Army Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxell served our country for 38 years. Thank you so much for your service. Most recently served as the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was the senior non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Armed Forces from December 11th to 2015 until his retirement on December 13th, 2019. In that role, he served as the principal military advisor to the chairman and the Secretary of Defense on all matters involving joint and combined total force integration, utilization, health of the force, and joint development for enlisted personnel. You've got a storied career, no doubt about it, as I read all your accolades. I did want to highlight that you had 5 combat tours of duty, including making the combat parachute jump and service in Operation Just Cause in Panama, Operation Desert Shield and Storm, 2 tours on Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. So again, thank you for 38 years of service to our country. Thank you, somewhat inadequate, but it's important to say that. And I think in summary, I'd say post-retirement, you're an author, you're a consultant in a lot of different varieties. And we are just honored and I'm happy to welcome you to the show this afternoon.
Well, thanks so much, Tom and Jodi. It's an honor to be here today.
I would love for you to do far more justice to your storied military career than I would be able to do, and just give our audience kind of a glimpse into your background and your military career as a starting point today.
Yeah, so I was born in Springfield, Illinois. I grew up in Davenport, Iowa, Quad Cities, USA, right on the Mississippi River. Joined the military when I was 18 years old as a kid that had no purpose, motivation, direction. And I got into the military, and as Forrest Gump would say, I was kind of like one of those round pegs. I fit in there. And I got to my first duty station, and within a month, I met this young lady named Sandra Jimenez at this was in El Paso, Texas. And 6 months
for Bliss, right? Bliss?
For Bliss, yeah.
Yeah.
Back when the 3rd ACR was there. And we got married in September of 83. So we've been married 41 years. She was
Congratulations.
on this journey with me for 38 years. And we've raised 3 sons. Like you said, I spent 5 tours in combat, spent a lot of years in the 82nd Airborne Division, Stryker Brigade kind of units, heavy units and light units. So I've got a diverse background, but I spent almost 20 years as a command sergeant major in the Army, culminating, as you described, the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. For 43 of my 48 months, I worked for Marine General Joe Dunford, as well as Secretary of Defense's various ones, Ash Carter for a year, God rest his soul, Jim Mattis for 2 years, and then various ones in my last year, which culminated with Mark Esper. And for my last 5 months, I worked for General Mark Milley when he was the chairman. And I was a reconnaissance soldier throughout my career, but again, spent a lot of time in infantry units as well as heavy Army units, so a pretty diverse career. And now a small business owner of PME Hard Consulting, and I'm a leadership coach, brand ambassador, a motivational speaker, and I'm a published author of my memoir, Surrender or Die, Reflections of a Combat Leader. And now my wife and I live in Lakewood, Washington, where I served twice before here at Joint Base Lewis McChord as a Stryker Brigade CSM and as the First Corps CSM. When we retired out of the Pentagon, all of our sons were located here. And so we wanted to be around our grandchildren, so we moved here. And now all of our kids are grown up. We have 4 grandchildren, and we also are raising 2 puppies right now, 2 Yorkie pups, who are a pain in my right now.
Joe,
That's the most intimidating part of what you've talked about. Yeah.
Jody's got 5 dogs.
I have 5 dogs.
Oh,
I have
wow.
four Chihuahuas and a red heeler.
I love Chihuahuas.
Yeah, they're super fun. They're kind of
Yeah, they're feisty.
crazy and fun and
Yeah.
snuggly when they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes Jody will wake up one day and it'll just be on her head.
Actually, that's a true
dog will
story.
be sleeping on her head. Yeah.
That is actually a true story. Yeah. It's funny hearing you talk about Fort Bragg. I used to work with a gentleman, and he always called Fort Bragg the center of the military universe.
100%. The center
Yeah.
of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we have to call it Fort Liberty.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Back then it was Fort Bragg when he
It'll
was,
always be Fort Bragg.
that's how he always introduced himself. I'm stationed at Fort Bragg, and it's the
Or, you know,
center.
when I my first tour of duty at Fort Bliss, and then I did 3 years in Germany in heavy units, I re-enlisted to go to Fort Bragg to the 82nd Airborne Division. And when I got there and I saw the culture of excellence, I saw the esprit de corps, I saw just the pride brimming from being a paratrooper in the 82nd. I knew I had found my calling there, and I never wanted to leave. Unfortunately, I had to leave, but every time I had to leave, there was a tear in my eye, leaving knowing that I wasn't going to wear that maroon beret anymore.
Yep. 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 Where were you at in Germany?
First time in 1984 to 87 at a place called Gelnhausen, back when the 3rd Armored Division was there. I served in the 3rd Battalion, 33rd Armor. And then I was there again in 92 to 95 in Schweinfurt when the 3rd Infantry Division was there. I mean, they're in Fort Stewart, Georgia. But I served in Schweinfurt in the 3rd Squadron, 4th Cavalry, which at the time was the Division Cavalry Squadron for the 3rd Infantry Division.
Gotcha. I always ask. My husband was in Gießen for a while.
Oh, yeah. Right down the road from Gelnhausen. Yeah.
Yep. In 2001, he was stationed in Gießen when 9/11 happened. So yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
Jody's husband was on the recruiter side of the house during his time.
He would tell you he was field artillery before that for sure.
Well, I will tell you, recruiting is the most important job that we have in the military right now in maintaining national security. Because as you both know, we've gone through a recruiting crisis the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say there's reasons for that. But in the end, those recruiting non-commissioned officers and officers have the toughest job, because if they don't bring in the requisite talent that we need to fill the force, then we are not going to be able to accomplish the mission on the other end in an overseas assignment, in combat, or whatever. So hats off to your husband, because being a recruiter is one of the most toughest jobs, but more importantly, it is the most important job we have right now in maintaining our national security.
Yeah, no, it can definitely be tough
Agreed.
sledding.
We talk about our frontline teams all day long about that too, in the banking business too, about how they're the most important folks on our team too. So it pales in comparison to on the military side for serving our country, but certainly everybody has their value. So take us back to when you were 18, which was just a couple of years ago. Okay.
Same for me.
You said don't people say, yeah, I was young and dumb, I just joined the military. So, but everybody has a story as to why. 'Cause
Yeah.
you were in the Midwest. What was the impetus? What got you motivated to sign?
So again, I was a half athlete. I didn't do well in school. I ran the streets a lot with my friends, but I had this group of older kids from my neighborhood, a year or 2 years older than me, and I would see them leave. They had joined military service, and I would see them leave, and they were just like me. But when they returned, they had transformed into something that really I was in awe of. They walked a little bit taller. They walked with their chest out. They were proud. They were sinewy, muscular, and fit, and they were boisterous in their conversation, and they were confident. And I was like, I don't know what kind of drug they're giving them in the military, but I want
Sign
some
me
of
up.
that, you know? And so that was kind of the motivation, because I didn't have any prospects of going to college because I didn't have the grades. I wasn't an athlete or anything, and my parents couldn't afford to send me to school. So I needed to do something. And that was it. Seeing the example of those folks that had come back from their recruit training or their assignments that compelled me to want to be a part of the United States military.
Didn't you say, little birdie told me something about you, John, that there's like Army muscle or gym muscle or something. Isn't there a difference between the two muscles?
Oh, yeah.
I'm intrigued.
I know you gotta finish the story, okay?
It's a phrase. This must have been Hendricks talking to you, okay?
Yeah, we won't say his full name, but Keith Hendricks. Yeah, he
Yeah.
said that. Fort Carson
Social Security.
started in early May. Yeah, go ahead.
I use this phrase all the time: no muscle cars in the ranks. And what I meant by that is when we talk about the requisite fitness level to endure the brutality and unforgiveness of combat, there's a physical, mental, and emotional aspect to being ready, dare I say, hard to face those kinds of conditions in combat. And too many times people that focus on lifting a lot of weights, gaining a lot of weight, getting big muscles and everything, that normally doesn't pay off in the cardio department when you're hiking the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan, or you're wearing 120, 130 pounds of kit in 110-degree weather in the cities of Iraq and everything. And so I used to say all the time, no muscle cars, because normally a muscle car, it looks good.
Just for show. For show,
good.
right? Yeah.
It's got, it's loud. It's got this big engine and everything, but it's got a little gas tank. And so we want people that, yes, they have muscular strength, muscular endurance, but they have to have cardiovascular fitness to especially endure the terrain, weather, and the constant pace of combat operations. So that's where I got that from. So when guys were telling me, yeah, I can bench press 400 pounds, I said, okay, sprint 200 meters, come back and let me see you bench press at 400 pounds. Okay.
Yeah, right now.
All right. Because that doesn't equate to combat effectiveness in terms of speed, power, and agility that is needed in a combat zone. God bless people that want to go out there and be these big muscle cars and everything and want to have the big arms and everything. But I'll take the guy that has a general level of fitness across those categories I just talked about over a big muscle head any day of the week.
So we were before this podcast, we were talking about Lou Ferrigno. So, right, the Incredible Hulk. So that's for a muscle car type.
Yeah, that's
right?
a muscle car. Now, Ferrigno, I mean, he's a world-class athlete, but dare I say,
He ran a lot on the show, as I recall.
Yeah.
I know he did run, but he was green.
Yeah, I mean, when he was running on that show, I mean, again, it's Hollywood, so he's probably running 25, 30, 50 meters and then calling it quits.
They played over and over
As a
again.
body
Yeah, but if you put that guy on a react to combat drill or react to indirect fire drill in combat with 130 pounds of kit on, where he has to constantly keep moving at a rapid pace to get out of where the impact zone of those rounds are, you're talking about a guy that can potentially be a liability, especially if that terrain is rough, uneven, and steep. Yeah, he looks good. He's a great athlete and everything. But again, that's not what we want our troops looking like or the kind of shape we want them in to be able to deal with the elements of combat.
Great.
Yeah, definitely a required tape test kind of guy. So you talked about why you joined and why you enlisted. If there's a young person that's listening to this today or a parent of a young person, what advice would you give them about joining the military, today's military, which is different, of course, than when you enlisted so long ago? Advice you'd give them about the decision to join, and then also if they are getting in with the mindset that they're going to make a career of it, just like you did, and be in it for the long haul, what career advice would you give them so they get off to a good right start and do all the things as quickly and at a clip that they should to make sure that it's a successful career over 2 decades plus?
So that's a great question. First of all, I would explain to them not only the potential recruit, but their family members, their parents or siblings or whoever, that this is a commitment. And whether you are active guard or reserve, and whether you're just going to come in for 4 to 6 years or whatever it is, and you're only coming in for the educational benefits or things like that, or the VA benefits associated with being a veteran, understand that is a commitment for that enlistment that you brought in or that commissioning that you came in for. So for that 5 years, you have to be totally dedicated to making yourself the best you can be. That means what we've already kind of talked about: physically, mentally, emotionally, technically, tactically, and educationally. You have to make yourself the best that you can be and understand that you're going to be part of a high-performing team that expects you to be at your best every day. And especially when it's a situation like combat or in a deployment or something, that they expect you to be at your best all the time, every time in what you're doing. That means you have to come in with a focus on making yourself better. And in turn, you're going to make that team better so that they are best prepared to face the conditions that they could encounter on the worst day of their life in combat. Now, if someone is thinking about making it a career, my advice is, how do you grow and develop and get better every day? Now, you do that initially, if someone's just going to do one tour, but for the long term, you want to set goals for yourself and you want to dream big on what you want to do in the military. And I will tell you, every time I wanted to do something to better myself professionally and personally in the military, all I had to do was this: raise my hand and say, I want to go to airborne school. I want to be a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. I want to go to Ranger School. I want to be a jump master. I want to be a pathfinder. I want to get a college degree. All I had to do was raise my hand and make that commitment. And then throughout your career, visualize, as you set these lofty, attainable goals for yourself, visualize yourself doing the necessary steps to reach your goals. And once you reach a goal, then you got to set another one that could be more lofty and everything. I never thought that I would one day be the SEAC and the senior enlisted guy in the entire U.S. Armed Forces, but I wanted to be the best that I could be. I wanted to grow and develop, and I wanted to get more responsibility as I grew. And once you visualize yourself doing the things necessary, all you have to do is go out and get it done. Now, we all know in military service, you're going to face adversity. You're going to serve around people that you really don't care for because you don't have the same kind of value system. But you cannot allow anybody like that to stop you from reaching your goals. The only way that someone will not reach their goals in military service throughout a career is because they quit on themselves or they allow other outside influences to prevent them from getting after that. The bottom line is, when you make a career out of the military, you can be all that you want to be. And all you have to do is make that commitment and say, I'm going to go do this and get after it.
Kind of want to bottle that up and play that back. It's great advice for somebody that's about to join the military or considering it. It's also just honestly great life advice.
Yeah.
I have a young son in college, and maybe I'll play this back on repeat.
They always say, like in sports, act like you've been there before when you're in the end zone, but you got to act like you want to be there too. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to invest in yourself or invest in our country or invest in the tasks that are ahead of you or advancing your career, then don't go. And so good advice, because you're doing a disservice to the country. Yeah. That feels too bold to say that, but you want the best of the best out there to cover everyone's backs.
Well, and Tom, you know what we don't talk about, what doesn't get talked about a lot, the more we don't do that at the individual and collective level, in the end, especially if it's large-scale combat, we could be relinquishing competitive advantages to our enemy that we are expected to go and fight. So we have to expect, when we serve in the military, and especially in this expeditionary military that we're in right now, that everything we do every day has an effect on what we can do on the worst day of our life in combat. And the last thing we want to do is to kind of go through things half step or not fully commit, that in the end, all of a sudden the enemy has an advantage over us. The American people expect every man or woman in the United States military to be at their best on their worst day. And we who have served in the military, or those that are serving now, have to understand that that's a commitment that they have to make to themselves, to their battle buddies, to the institution known as the United States Army, but most importantly, to our country, the United States of America, and the over 300 million citizens that we are expected to safeguard.
We've had a lot of guests, as you know. When I introduced you today, we were episode 72. And so we've had a lot of guests that are veterans that are giving back in some form or another, whether it's through consultative work or whether it's through different organizations that are addressing needs, whether it's food insecurity, PTSD, mental health issues, you name it. And I was going to be sarcastic and say, since John left the military, he's not doing anything, right, Jodi? He's kind of lazy.
I think his schedule is probably busier than ours combined.
He's actually overbooking himself to go on travel.
I'm going to feel bad next time I gripe about being busy.
But so it seems like there's a lot of people that give back once they retire post-military, right? But what are ways what gravitated you to do that? Like it was a no-brainer for you, because it seems like every day you're giving back.
Yeah, I think you never lose the desire to serve others. When you serve in an institution like the United States military, where a core tenet is selfless service, and you are focused on developing, assisting, and helping others, I don't think you ever lose that. And so when I retired, I said, I don't want to be that SEAC again, or that command sergeant major, and run around and make Joe pick up cigarette butts or jump on their butt because they don't have their headgear on. I didn't want to be lost in my museum, because now I'm a retiree and I have zero authority. But I focused, I built kind of this vision, and this focus I have is in three areas as a retiree. One is to pay it forward to the current men and women in the military. How can I help them? And I do a lot of that by motivational speaking, unit visits, but I also do it through my consulting efforts with industry that assists the military, with fitness equipment, with nutrition, and things like that. Lethality, like eyewear and everything, making sure that our troops have the best so that they can be best prepared. But my second one is, how do I give back to my fellow veterans, and how do I help them? So I'm the national ambassador for the Veterans of Foreign War. I do a lot of speaking on behalf of the VFW. I am, as I mentioned before, and I'm an ambassador for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's nonprofit Hiring Our Heroes. I sit on multiple boards, and as a matter of fact, this weekend I'll be in Nashville supporting the Hunter 7 Foundation, which is a foundation that supports veterans that are suffering from cancer or like diseases like that. So, and then last but not least, though, I wanted to make life comfortable for my wife, my kids, and prepare a future for my grandchildren. So that's why I became a small business owner. That's why I've invested in other businesses, but more importantly, why I'm working like I'm working now, so that my grandchildren can have a future that me and my wife didn't have when we were growing up. So those are kind of the three things that I focus on, and I focus on them in that order. And that first and foremost is, how do I pay it forward to the men and women in uniform and help them? I think we all know there are two types of retirees in the world. There's enablers and there's agitators. And the agitators say, oh, the military's all jacked up. When I was in, it was all great and all this stuff. I didn't want to be one of those guys. Will I be critical of the institution I served 38 years? Yes, but it'll be in a professional manner and in a professional direction with the people that can fix things. But it won't be on social media by complaining about anything that's going on with the military. I wanted to be an enabler, and how can I help? And because of that focus, I am constantly being invited out to do motivational speaking, to do leadership seminars, to just come out and visit the units and fire people up and everything. And in the end, that's what I enjoy the most, is that right there. And if I can help one service member or one veteran every day for the rest of my life, then I will have a fruitful post-military life.
You think about your grandkids that may not appreciate what you're doing now, but when going down the road, they'll say, yeah, he did that for me. But I think a sacrifice, and I think a servant leadership for the kind of the emblematic of who you are when it means giving back to the community that you served and loved. So we're on to his book.
We are. I will tell you, though, that as you talked about the things that you didn't want to necessarily be in retirement, well, you mentioned the head cover, and seeing that kind of stuff drives my husband nuts to this day. If we're out on installation and he sees somebody without it, or shoelace is not tucked in right, I mean, yeah, I like to get under his skin a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's hard for anybody that has been in this institution and has been a focus of on-the-spot corrections and in discipline and everything. But I told myself, hey, look, I had 38 years to get the military right, and if I didn't get it right, shame on me. I've got confidence that this generation of leaders is going to keep us as the number one military of choice for global peace and security around the world. So, yeah, I mean, I see a kid that's looking kind of bad sackish, it can't my attention, but I let it go now.
Yeah. My husband will let it go, but he'll mutter
He'll still
under his
talk about
breath.
it,
He'll
though.
mutter
Yeah.
under his breath as we walk to the car.
I should have done that.
That's for sure. Or he'll give me the on-the-spot correction as if it was me. So I do want to shift gears to your book. You're the author of the book, Surrender or Die, Reflections of a Combat Leader. And, I have a lot of questions about it, but
There's a plethora of
there's
questions
a
in here.
plethora of
Yeah.
questions. Tom's favorite word.
This is it right here.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Love it.
We're going to change it to now a video
We're going to have
podcast.
to.
Yeah.
Or
That-
take a screenshot of that.
That's a cool cover. Who designed that?
This was a photo. So my author coach that helped me write my book, Ann McIndoe, she said, hey, we got to put a powerful photo on the front of it. And this was me when I was the command sergeant major of all combat forces in Afghanistan, 2011 and 12. And I was out with one of our NATO partners, the French Airborne Brigade, and we were scaling this huge mountain in eastern Afghanistan. And when I got to the top of the hill, there was a photographer up there who had been a part of the patrol in front of us and was taking a picture of me. And so I just threw up the peace sign, and as you can see, my mouth is open, so I was sucking wind coming up that mountain. But I wasn't a muscle car, though, because I was ready to fight if I had to right then and there. But that was the picture that as you can see, you got the mountains of Afghanistan in the background.
Yeah.
You got a little bit of an American flag back here. And,
Perfect.
and then it has my company, the creator of my nonprofit is eTool Nation, and my company is PME Hard Consulting. And then my former boss, chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff, General Joe Dunford, wrote the foreword for my book. So,
That's amazing. Love it. Hey everyone, if you're looking for a little extra financial flexibility to take the family on a vacation, tackle that home renovation, or just get through the ups and downs of military life, we've got some great news for our military listeners.
Absolutely. Armed Forces Bank offers access loans that are perfect for handling life's unexpected expenses, consolidating debt, or even making that big purchase you've been thinking about. And with our fast approval process, you can get the funds you need quickly and easily without all the hassle.
At Armed Forces Bank, about 75% of our team is affiliated with the military, so we understand your unique needs. We've been supporting military families for over 100 years, and we're here to help you take control of your finances.
Whether you're active duty, a veteran, or a reservist, we're committed to offering you flexible terms and competitive rates, making sure you get a loan that fits your life.
So if you're ready to take that next step, head over to afbank.com or visit a branch near you. Armed Forces Bank, serving those who serve.
Member FDIC, subject to credit approval. Origination fee applies. Direct deposit relationship required. Loan terms are based on loan amount.
Bring us into that experience. What caused you to say, I have had such a journey, such experiences that I need to distill this to a book. I need to share this. I know as part of this, and I think the company name bears this out, the term that you coined, PME,
yeah.
physically, mentally, emotional. You've talked about why all of those aspects of readiness are important. What made you want to write this book, and why was that important to you?
So I never thought that I would write a book, especially a memoir, about my life. But when you look at when I became the SEAC, people, when I said, hey, I did a combat jump in 1989 in Panama City, Panama, as part of Operation Just Cause, I'm a Desert Shield, Desert Storm veteran, and I'm nearing 38 years and almost 20 years time and grade. But the thing that kind of took it off where people really wanted to know about me is when Secretary Mattis became the Secretary of Defense. And when he came in, after getting sworn in, he brought myself and the service senior enlisted leaders, the Sergeant Major of the Army and the other service guys. And he said, get the word out. We are no longer going to talk about just defeating any threat to the United States. We're going to annihilate any threat to the United States. And that was a powerful message coming from the Secretary of Defense. And when we sent that out to the force, the troops loved it, because that's what they want to hear, is that those of us in Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon, we understand the challenges that were going on then in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, all of these places that we had troops fighting, but also those holding the line in South Korea, trying to maintain a ceasefire in Colombia, and some of the other areas around the world that we had troops stationed at. And so to compliment my big boss, and Joe Dunford, my immediate boss, the chairman, was always talking about fighting and winning on any given day. And so I happened to be on a trip to Syria where I was visiting our most elite Army Special Operations Forces during the fall of Raqqa, where our Syrian Democratic Force partners with Special Operations support were about to just crush ISIS. And while I was there, one of the operators, sergeant majors for that unit, his name is George, he and I developed a pretty good relationship, and we kept talking about the profession and the development of non-commissioned officers through combat experience, meaning that we wanted to develop them in such a way that they understood the law of land warfare. They were professional in their aspects, and they didn't let losses in combat become personal because they knew they were professional soldiers. And we talked about being able to defeat any threat by any means necessary, even if that meant using your entrenching tool to neutralize the threat or kill the enemy. And so I'm up on this building, and every time there was a lull in this fight, the ISIS would come out with a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device or a female suicide bomber or some asymmetric threat that would come out and cause big casualties on the Syrian Democratic Forces and wound some of our American advisors as well. And so I was up there, and, you have to excuse my language on this. And as I watched this, I said, you know what? These have two options. They can surrender or die. And so the unit sergeant major, Rob is his name, or was his name at the time. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, we're a peace-loving nation, and we focus this with our partners and allies. And if they surrender, we'll treat them humanely. We'll safeguard them to a detainee holding facility cell, give them food, place to sleep, but most importantly, due process in a court of law. But if they choose not to surrender, then let there be no doubt we're going to kill them with extreme prejudice, whether that's dropping bombs on them, working through our partner forces to neutralize them, shooting them in the face if we have to, or beating them to death with our entrenching tools. And so Rob told me, he said, hey, you ought to send that to Secretary Mattis and General Dunford in your update. So I did. And Mattis wrote back to me and said, I want you to keep saying that because that supports my narrative of we are going to annihilate any threat to the United States of America. And I started doing that as a means of inspiring the troops and maybe intimidating the enemy a little bit if they were eavesdropping on some of the platforms I was talking on or whatever. And it was never an issue. And until I was Christmas Day of 2017 on a USO tour, I was in Bagram Airfield. We had the troops in there, and we had all these movie stars and performers that were going to do a show for the troops. And General Dunford and I always fired the troops up right away. And I was up on stage, and I had an entrenching tool in my hand, and Medal of Honor recipient Flo Groberg was with me with a Medal of Honor or with a entrenching tool. And I said that same phrase. And after it fired the troops up, blew the roof off the place. And after I got done and I walked off, there was a Washington Post reporter in the audience who approached me and said, hey, you just told the troops it was okay to go out and commit war crimes. I said, I did nothing of the sort. I said, we train soldiers, Marines, battlefield airmen, and special operators how to use non-standard weapons to neutralize enemy threats. And he said, well, I'm going to go public with this. And I said, well, knock yourself out. But as I thought about it, I got with my public affairs guy back in Washington, D.C., Rob Couture, who's a close friend of mine now. And I said, hey, this guy's going to do an article. What should we do? And he said, let's beat him to the punch. So we did a quote of what I said. I gave him a picture of me holding an entrenching tool. And we did a social media post with this. Basically, it was a message to ISIS that you had two options, surrender or die. And we did it to counter this negative narrative that the Washington Post was going to put out. But what we didn't realize, that post that we did on Twitter and Facebook went viral. And all of a sudden, I was on the news in places like Belgium, France, Japan, South Korea. I was on the Fox 5 network. They were doing a special about me. CNN, New York Times, ABC, everybody. All of a sudden, you got this enlisted guy telling the enemy that we're going to kill him with shovels and everything. And what it did, though, is exactly what I hoped it would do. It provided purpose, motivation, direction, and most importantly, inspiration to the troops all over the world.
Yeah.
Now, People in Washington, D.C. didn't like it. Members of Congress were critical of me. There were people in the Pentagon that said this enlisted guy is talking out of turn and everything. But anyways, this started down a road where all of a sudden I ended up getting suspended as the SEAC for multiple things. It was this torturous kind of language. I was being hostile and toxic, but there was other things. There was an effort made by 1 to 3 people that they wanted me to go away because I was being too vocal. And in their opinion, I wasn't representing the force the way it should be. None of them were in my chain of command. The chairman and SecDef loved what I said, but I think you all know the power of the inspector general. And I found myself suspended for 6 months, no less. And after one day of feeling sorry for myself, I said, you know what? I'm going to fight this to the end because I delivered a motivational message. And then whatever I've done that they're investigating me for now, I've never had any ill will to do anything wrong. Well, in the end, they found a couple things that I had been doing wrong. I was buying chow for my troops. They were going to the store there in the Pentagon. I'd give them money to get food for everybody else. Yeah, I guess I was wrong doing that. And the other thing was implied endorsement of folks that were supporting troops. I was on a hike in Scotland and with the chef Robert Irvine, handed out these protein bars to everybody that was doing the hike. And I was interviewed there and they said, how you doing? I said, hey, this guy gave us a protein bar. We're ready to get after this 54-mile hike. Implied endorsement. So anyways, in the bottom line, out of all the things that I was accused of, the most heinous ones being torturous language and hostile and toxic, everything was dismissed. I got a counseling statement for the other 2, and I got reinstated. Throughout this whole process, because I had built relationships with the Pentagon Press Corps, I had built relationships with the State Department and the White House and other things, but most importantly, I built this lasting relationship with the entire force. People had a wait and see thing. And in the end, when I got reinstated, the support was overwhelming. And one of the most emotional messages I got that really made me feel good was from a Marine captain, female captain that I had served with. And she wrote on social media on a post that said I was reinstated. She said in the post, "Relax, America, he's back." So after all of that, after all of my combat tours, after my 38-year career, after my time spent with 1 year with the Obama administration, 3 years with the Trump administration, people said you need to write a book. And I never knew how to get after it and anything until I met a guy on an airplane who was a published author. And we exchanged business cards and he Googled me and he saw my Wikipedia page and everything. And he said, have you ever thought about writing a book? I said, I don't know how to get after it. People want me to. So he put me in touch with Ann, this author coach. And I told her, I said, look, I got to get this done fast because I'm busy. And if I'm a procrastinator and I don't want to say, hey, I'm writing a book. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, I'm still writing on it. So from concept to publishing in 90 days, we got it. In February of 23, we published it. For a few weeks, I was #1 on Amazon for military books. But then a couple of Medal of Honor guys wrote their books, and I don't have a chance against those guys. But the bottom line, this is a story of my life from when I was growing up in Davenport, Iowa, to my full 38-year career. There's leadership tidbits in here. I write a whole chapter about the suspension and how I had to deal with that, how I had to deal with my wife and I kind of being ostracized through the whole process. I also talk about combat. I talk about the after effects of combat with post-traumatic stress and things like that. And I talk about PME Hard and E-Tool Nation. So to close that out, when I retired, the E-Tool, I have signed almost 7,000 military shovels in the last 7 years. And the entrenching tool went from a utility tool to be used for digging and things like that, to now it's a symbol of living a warrior ethos. And everywhere I go, and it's not just the Army or the Marine Corps. I was with the U.S. Space Force a couple weeks ago, and I was signing entrenching tools there. I was with the Air Force 2 weeks ago, signing entrenching tools there. But the bottom line is I wanted to write a book that people would remember. And so that's why I titled it Surrender or Die, Reflections of a Combat Leader.
That's a pretty amazing story.
So
to
people
how we got to the book. Yeah.
people can get to the book through Amazon and other sources. Is that right?
Yeah, they can Amazon online at barnesandnoble.com.
Okay.
Very good.
They can order off my website, pmehard.com.
I'm glad you mentioned the website.
Awesome. John, I'm going to take you to the next part of this too, because we talk to a lot of our clients that want to be business owners, like military spouses, veterans. They want to start a business. You've got eTool Nation, you've got PM Hard, you've got all this consulting stuff that you're doing. But any best practices, any suggestions as people are in career transitioning that if they were to start a business, are there some things that you would give from it's almost like he's our advice guy, right?
I know.
Advice to young kids getting into the military. What's the advice that you would give to future business owners?
Do all of your research. First of all, know what you want to do.
Yeah.
First and foremost, make sure that you have a background that supports that. For 4 years as the SEAC, I was talking to troops every day. I had thousands of sets and reps of being in front of all kinds of audiences, from a squad of troops in Afghanistan to 12,000 people in the Verizon Center and doing all kinds of things. So I knew that, and then being a guy, a 20-year Command Sergeant Major SEAC, I knew how to advise CEO type people, meaning commanding officers, general and flight officers, and things like that. And I knew how to analyze organizations to determine where strengths and weaknesses were and where opportunities and threats were to the business. And so, first of all, do your research, know exactly what you want to do, make sure you have the capital to start up and get your business going. That's where a lot of people, they don't have the money up front to really start their business and get after that. And then through it all, you have to understand who the competition is and what are they doing in real time to be effective. Because the minute you get stagnant in your business, the competition will pass you by. And last but not least, and this is that selfless service thing. As a business owner, I focus on these three things in this order. First and foremost, anybody that works for me, whether it's one of my employees or it's someone that I contract to do work for me, they get their due and proper pay on time, every time. I don't care how bad the business is doing or whether we've got cash flow problems. On time, every time, I'm going to pay the people working for me. I want them to know that they have security working for John Wayne Troxell and PME Hard Consulting. Second of all, I pay all of my bills associated with my businesses on time, every time. And number three, I pay myself when I can. But those first two take precedence always. And if you're in the business and you're worried first and foremost about paying yourself, you're probably not going to be in that business for very long. I've consulted for businesses that have been getting after their craft for 5 years, and they still haven't been able to pay themselves. But the business is growing, they're getting better, and they're about to reach that apex where things are going to start going downhill, and they're going to start seeing returns on their investment. So that's what I would say is make sure you do your research. Make sure that you have the startup capital to get it going. Make sure you stay committed to what you're doing because you're going to face adversity. Make sure you pay attention to the competition. And in the end, keep up the fire at the direction you're going. A lot of times, especially enlisted people that get out and try to be small business owners, they end up defaulting or going bankrupt or whatever not because they're getting burned out, but because they forget why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. You think about the three things you just listed about, it just feels like you got to have integrity. You got to have a great brand, a great reputation, a great image to get either repeat business or have people talk about you, and to pay vendors and to pay the team. I mean, nothing else matters, right? Because they can trust you.
Yeah. To give you an example, so I consulted for this. It's $1 billion company now. And we were looking to invest in Fort Bliss, Texas at an establishment there at Freedom's Crossing.
Which by the way, we have a branch inside of Freedom Crossing. You know that.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, now you know that. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I went in there to find out about the potential, and the doors were locked on this place. And there was a sign on the door that said it was the owners to the proprietors, the owners of the property to the proprietors, that said, you haven't paid your rent in 3 months and We have changed the locks on everything, and you're not going to be able to open your business till you pay your rent. And I thought to myself, so here was this business talking to me about us coming down and investing in this. And I thought to myself at the time, had I immediately jumped on that instead of getting on a plane, flying to Fort Bliss to check this out, I could have took us down the road where we were just paying the guy's bills. And in the end, when I got down there, I thought to myself, the proprietors of this place, what is their reputation going to be now when the place is closed because they couldn't pay their bills for whatever reason? And now the owners of this property certainly are not going to give them a positive review on how they did because they owe them over $30,000, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why number 2 is so important, that you pay your people first. You make sure you pay your bills associated with a company on time, every time, because the last thing you want is creditors crawling all over you when you're trying to grow your business. And in the end, pay yourself when you can. And sometimes, like, I have good months and I'm able to pay myself. There's other times that I can't pay myself for months because I'm too focused on growing the business. And that's the discipline, that's the motivation and the dedication to making your business work.
We're gonna bring this home, John, and I know Keith Hendricks, who's one of our very own banking center managers at Fort Carson. We were fortunate enough to have you today to talk about all your skills, your experience, your leadership, your brand ambassadorship, your motivational speaking, all that too. But for the record, we've got to have one thing you got to say about
the
Keith.
dirt.
Yeah, we need the dirt. And it'll forever be in this podcast, right, John? So anything that's, keep it clean though, please.
No, I've got nothing but.
We love him. It's a great addition to our team. Yeah.
I've got nothing but respect for Hendricks. He's one of the guys, like thousands of others that I served with, that they were selfless in everything they did in their career. Not just selfless, but fearless in going into battle.
Yeah.
You know, people want to put a premium on who's a combat veteran and who's not, even if you've gone in to Iraq or Afghanistan. I always talk about this, a willing acceptance of the risk of death by entering into a combat zone. I don't care what you do in there, you have accepted that potentially you will get killed doing the duties for your country here, and you do it with pride and you go in and get after that. That's the kind of guy Hendricks was. And he was always driven, to the point that I had lost contact with him after his military service and I retired. But he reached out to me. I was at Fort Carson and he was running one of his he had a restaurant.
The pizza shop. Yeah.
Yeah. And I went and visited it. And he was the same way, this pizza shop, that he was as a leader when he was working for me.
Yeah.
He was in charge, but he cared about his people. He was focused on building a cohesive team, and he was focused on being successful. So when I look at the United States of America, and especially to our veteran population, we will never have a hero crisis in this country because the Keith Hendricks of the world, through their military service, were always dedicated to get the job done and take care of their people. And they'll do the same thing in post-military life with what he was doing with his pizza joints, and certainly what he's doing running one of your chapters of Armed Forces Bank.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to edit that entire favorable comment.
We're going to have to make up a Keith story.
He does have some scar tissue on his fourth point of contact from Troxell, okay? So I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, we'll save that. Podcast number 2.
Hey, but you know, ass chewings are about love. They're not about hate. You love them so much.
So funny.
You want them to be the best that they can be and do the best job they can be. So you take the time out of your schedule to develop them. And sometimes it's in a way that is short on patience and calm voice. But in the end, Hendricks was one of the best that I ever served with.
I thought it makes I didn't know if my husband was the only one that used that phrase. I guess not. When you got teenagers, you do what you need to do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's play.
This has been a treat. Thank you for being here, but we are going to ask you to stick with us for just a couple of more seconds. We think it's lovely and endearing.
We'll let John be the judge of that. It may be annoying.
Yeah. We're not sure. But we have a game we like to play at the end of every podcast called the Military Minute. A chance for our audience to win gift cards for themselves, gift cards funds that they can donate to a charity of their choice. And I want to reflect on last podcast episode's Military Minute question.
Do you think he'll know the answer to this?
We were talking to somebody that runs our recruit division.
Yeah.
He might. I mean, it would be interesting to have that number
There's
specifically
plus or
committed to
minus
memory.
3%.
Plus or minus 3%. It's about Army recruiting. How many people enlisted in the Army for the first year after 9/11 happened? He's going to get so much closer.
He's
than I
getting
am.
really close. He's formulaically tabulating right now.
9/11 happened, and shortly after that, I was on my way to Iraq. I would say, with the size of our military then, I would say 45,000.
I'm wondering if you've got the wrong number, McLean.
No, he's wrong. So
Probably wrong.
it was plus or minus 300%. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I'm going to fact check McLean, but the number he has is 181,510, which is a very large.
True.
Yeah, we're not meaning to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
And there was such a time too of people wanting to join and wanting to do something
that
for sure.
day.
That makes sense because the Army has a phrase, we recruit the Marine Corps every year. And the Marine Corps' numbers are usually between 180,000 to just over 200,000. So
there you go then.
That makes sense.
Yep.
All right, fact check
Very
done.
good. So if
Thank
you are
you.
in our audience and after the last podcast, you guessed 181,510.
Exactly.
Remarkably, exactly. Watch for your name to drop and you could be the recipient of $50 gift card for yourself and $50 for a charity of your choice. And this week's Military Minute, if you listen to this podcast and you don't know the answer, then you need to get your ears checked. Because we have
go
said
back to
it.
listen to it again or Google John Wayne Troxell.
Yes, we've said it repeatedly. And you can't answer this one because, of course, you're going to know the answer. What is the name of John's book? We'll give him an easy one.
This
right?
is our way, John, of getting people to go find out, make sure they get the right answer. That means they're looking at the book somewhere.
Go find the book.
And
Full answer.
Enter the name.
Full answer, right.
Yes.
It can't just be half of the title. It has to be the full title.
Okay.
We agree. So,
and where the picture was taken at what time, what exact day, and who the photographer's name.
Okay, that might be overcomplicating it, Tom. So give us the name of the book, the full name of the book when this podcast drops, and then you too could be entered to win $50 for yourself, $50 to a charity of your choice. You can find, if you're going to Google that answer, if you didn't pay attention in the podcast, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and buy a copy while you're there, of course. So thank you, John, for spending time with us today. It's been a real treat. I've enjoyed hearing your story and your journey, and I'm excited to read the book.
And John, I know you enjoyed today's episode. All of us did. So go out to afbank.com and subscribe to the show, Militarily Speaking. Also, make sure to rate us, leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And those platforms, John, are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So looking forward to sharing the great stories and the great information from your perspective in a few weeks down the road, but people are really going to enjoy listening to your message. So thank you, John.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jodi. And God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Copyright Armed Forces Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. All non-Armed Forces Bank owned apps, websites, company names, and product names are trademarks or registered trademarks of their respective owners. Their mention does not imply any affiliation with or endorsement by Armed Forces Bank of them or their products and services. They are merely used as examples of the many available apps, companies, and websites that offer similar services. Before using any app or website, you should carefully review the terms of use, data collection, and privacy policy. Apps may have an initial cost or in-application purchase features. This information is general in nature and is not intended to be legal, tax, or financial advice. Although Armed Forces Bank believes this information to be accurate, it cannot ensure that it could change. Statements or opinions of individuals referenced herein are their own, not Armed Forces Bank. Consult an appropriate professional concerning your specific situation and respective governing bodies for applicable laws, such as irs.gov for current tax law. Armed Forces Bank, the Armed Forces Bank logo, and the Militarily Speaking logo are registered trademarks of Armed Forces Bank.